The origin of Kundalini meditation. Kundalini, the beginning. Long before you and I existed in our current forms, Earth was a beautiful place with abundance of forests, rich flora and fauna, and thousands of rivers and lakes. Some 900 million light years away, in the interstellar space, a parallel universe existed with an Earth-like planet 5 times bigger and far more beautiful. The sun in the solar system of this Earth-like planet was twice the size of our sun. The days were longer, so were the nights. Giant predators roamed freely in its forests that were vaster than our oceans. The Himalayas, 8 times the size of our Himalayas, were covered in snow. On those Himalayas, the biggest, widest, and highest mountain summit was called Kailasha. And Kailasha is where Shiva, the eternal yogi, meditated and lived with his consort Sati. No one knows how Shiva was born. Some seers said he was born at the time of creation, out of lightning and thunder, while some said he had come from yet another universe and taken up his abode at Kailasha. It was with his yogic prowess that Shiva remained ever youthful, most charismatic and enchanting. Once, Sati's father, a famed king, Daksha, had organized one of the grandest and greatest yajnas ever known to anyone in the 3 epochs. Brahma, Vishnu, Indra, Vasus, Adityas, and numerous other devas were invited to this most exclusive yajna.
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 Yes. Yajna means like a sacrifice.
Sacrifice?
Yeah. Sacrifice in the sense, the sacrificial fire and you offer to it.
Like a fire puja?
Somewhat.
Some are doing animal sacrifice?
Yeah. So that's all part of yajna, that can be part of yajna. Yajna is more elaborate and it's a lot of rituals and rules that you have to follow to conduct a yajna.
Okay, you read.
No, go ahead. It's good.
Yajna?
Yajna.
Yajna. The retweak.
Yes, retweak.
Ritwik. The Ritwik was none other than the great Brihaspati himself, overseeing every aspect from the correct pronunciation of mantras to the offering of right oblations and the 100,000 fire pits built there. The whole atmosphere was echoing with the sounds of conchs and most rhythmic Sanskrit chants, which were more invigorating than the nectar of Dhanavantri, the divine physician, and more heady than the wine.
The divine physician is Dhanvantri. Dhanvantri.
Dhanvantri?
Dhanvantri. Yeah, in English you can't spell all those words exactly right.
And more heady than the wine served in Indraloka. Mammoth structures with utmost luxury had been erected to provide every comfort to the guests.
The place of Yajna itself was a grand palace, next to none, and was a mix of open and enclosed areas. On wide pathways, numerous chariots pulled by snow-white or jet-black steeds were organized so invitees could move around. It was said that by our current measure of time, it would take 7 days just to get from the first fire pit to the last one. While all the devas are exulting in divine ecstasy at Daksha's palace, Shiva meditated quietly on Kailasa. This did not sit well with Sati. "Should we not be at my father's yajna, my lord?" asked Sati. Sati is Lord Shiva's wife. A little hesitatingly, because she knew well that Shiva fathomed everything. "No, Sati," Shiva murmured in his deep voice, like the Ganges flowing from his matted locks. "An honorable man must never go anywhere uninvited." "But it's my father, Lord," she spoke softly. "He must have forgotten to invite us." "Your father does not like Shiva, O innocent one," Shiva spoke lovingly, "because Shiva is sovereign and unbound by any custom. Please, can we go?" Sati tried her luck. "It's been ages since I last met my family." "You can if you want, Sati. Shiva will not." Thus he closed his eyes and plunged into dhyana, into meditation. Unable to resist the temptation, Sati, clad in the finest silk and adorned with the most precious jewels, called upon Shiva's Ganas, who immediately arranged for a flying chariot. From several miles away, Sati could smell the fragrance in the air. She could hear the chants and the sound of conch, veena and mridanga. She was already missing Shiva, but she knew that Shiva only did what he had to do. As she got closer to the venue, she could not help but appreciate its magnanimity. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. As Sati descended from her chariot, hundreds of handmaids ran towards her, their very own Sati, who was their princess at one time. They garlanded her with exquisite flowers that never withered. They spread petals of rose and lotuses on the path where she would walk. Some fanned her with hand fans made from the feathers of Himalayan swans. Some offered her betel nut. Some sprinkled scent in the air. Jain conchs were blasted. Gandharvas sang the welcome songs as she made way. So it's like a very big event. They organize like a lot of so many guests will come. They invite like many kings from different neighboring countries. Sati walked around in search of her mother and sisters and saw that most glorious seats had been brought for the Devas and their consorts. With great eagerness and curiosity, she went around looking for Shiva's seat, but there was none. Sati's heart sank. Could this just be an oversight, she thought. She felt relieved that Shiva was not there because his fury would have destroyed everything in a split second. Meanwhile, Queen Prasuti saw her daughter Sati and ran towards her. Out of her 24 daughters, she loved Sati the most because she knew that Sati was none other than the incarnation of Adya Shakti herself. Daksha stopped Prasuti midway and prohibited her from greeting Sati. Daksha is Sati's father. Sati was taken aback by her father's demeanor, yet she proceeded to touch his feet, but he withdrew. The music suddenly stopped, and everyone around looked at Daksha's stern face as he stood cross-armed with legs slightly apart. Both he and Sati were silent for a few moments. Realizing that her father was not going to speak first, she said, "Where should I sit, father? I don't see Shiva's seat or mine next to his." "Seat for that mendicant?" Daksha scoffed. "This is a royal gathering and not a feast for beggars and ascetics." "Father," Sati raised her voice, "how could you even think that I will invite an Aghori like Shiva here?" Daksha continued with tirade. "I disowned you the day you married that naked, ash-smeared eccentric. Only a pauper like him would send his wife uninvited."
Oh.
"Father," Sati cried, "Shiva is the Lord of the Lords. My food," Daksha screamed, "with his rusty trident, he is not even fit to be a guard of my stable. He is only good for those decapitated, deformed, enslaved gods and residents of cremation grounds."
Decapitated.
Sati cupped her jeweled ears with her pink and delicate hands. Her moonlike fair face turned crimson, and tears began trickling down ceaselessly. Like a true pativrata, there was only one man Sati had ever loved, and he was Shiva. Pativrata means a wife who is like only one man, she is dedicated to one man. That's the meaning of pativrata. Pati means husband, and vrata is like a vow. An incarnate of Adya Shakti. Adya Shakti means the primordial form of energy. She is the incarnation of Sati, is the incarnation of the primordial form of energy, the supreme energy herself. Sati well knew that Shiva was the god of the three worlds, an immortal yogi who was beyond destruction and mortality. Overcome with a great sense of guilt for hearing such terrible things about Shiva, she felt she had violated her Pativrata dharma. In that instant, Sati realized why the omniscient Shiva had forbidden her from attending the yajna. Recalling her conversation with Shiva, she repented for not listening to him. She felt that by hurting Shiva, she no longer deserved to live. Daksha, Sati's eyes turned embers. Vedic chants came to a standstill, and the planet shook at the loud cry of Sati. No one in any universe has ever dared to speak of Shiva like this. Fie on me for hearing such words about him. You will repent this, Daksha. Thus, in that very moment, Sati invoked her latent energy and turned her body into a mound of ash. The Devas trembled. The haughty Daksha was scared too, but he did not show it. Daksha, Brihaspati spoke solemnly. Everything you have ever known will come to an end now. How? What can that one-man army do? I will. Brihaspati raised his arm, signaling Daksha to stop, because he did not want to hear anything degrading about Shiva, for he had become Brihaspati, the wishes of all, the wisest of all, by the grace of Shiva. Brihaspati is the guru of all the gods. The Ganas, the Bhuta Ganas, the assistants of Lord Shiva, who had accompanied Sati, hurried back to Kailasa at the speed of light and eulogized Shiva to bring him out of his deep dhyana. Shiva gently opened his long eyes. They prostrated before him and in great fear narrated what had transpired at Daksha's yajna. Shiva rose from his seat in great fury. His right hand reached his head, from where he pulled one strand of his matted locks and flung it on the ground. A mammoth figure rose as soon as the lock hit the ground. It was Veerabhadra, a terrifying Gana of Shiva. Dark like coal, Veerabhadra had 8 hands, each one holding a weapon. Still livid, Shiva took out one more lock and pitched it on the ground. This time arose Bhadra Kali, the wrathful and terrifying form of Devi. Dark like the night of Amavasya, she had 18 hands holding conch, discus, lotus, mace, trident, lance, scimitar, sword, thunderbolt, a demon's head, goblet, god, water pot, cleaver, shield, bow, and arrow. Annihilate, Shiva commanded and pointed in the direction of Daksha's yajna. He picked up his damaru and began playing. Damaru is the drum that Shiva holds. And began playing it wildly. Birds hid in their nests. Ducks and cows had miscarriages. Trees fell. Oceans swelled. And with each strike of the damaru, random energies began manifesting. Bhadrakali ululated. Mountains.
That's what it means. Making that sound.
Okay. Mountains split in two and glaciers broke. 8 Devis, companion energies of the Supreme Goddess, appeared to assist her in the battle. They were Kali, Kartyayani, Chamundi, Ishani, Mundamardini, Bhadra, Vaishnavi, and Twarita. Shiva, the Nataraja means the dancer, the king of dancers, began the cosmic dance of destruction, and not before long, countless Ganas assumed wrathful and terrifying forms. Hara Hara Mahadeva, they bellowed. Veerabhadra and Bhadrakali, with Ganas in tow, arrived at Daksha's yajna and destroyed everyone and everything that came in their way. Many devas fled and many took to hiding. Some tried to combat but did not last more than a millionth fraction of a moment. The rest of the devas knew that it was worthless, if not altogether pointless, to fight against Shiva, even if it were for Daksha, the Prajapati. Shiva's legions continued the rampant destruction like wild elephants running amok in a garden of tender flowers. They were not after the devas but Daksha. It was his condescending behavior that had enraged Sati and Shiva. It was Daksha's arrogance that had taken away their revered goddess from them. Veerabhadra spotted Daksha, who was ordering his troops to charge. In one giant leap, Veerabhadra reached him, standing before him without uttering a word or a warning. Obeying Shiva's order, he decapitated Daksha in one effortless stroke. But the Ganas continued with the destruction. Fearing that this might be the end of time, the Devas, along with their retinues, approached Shiva and sang eulogies of his kind heart and glories. A few moments later, that would be a few thousand years on our earth, Shiva calmed down, but he did not speak to anyone. Veerabhadra, Bhadrakali, other Devis and Ganas merged back with Shiva's form, and he sat there in a somber mood. The Devas were aware that only Shiva could restore harmony, and he would have to do it before he assumed his yogic posture, for Shiva's dhyana could last for thousands of years. Dhyana means meditation. They pleaded him to forgive Daksha. At their bidding, Shiva went to the site of yajna. It had become a bloody battlefield. Uncountable gods there, entourage, horses, elephants lay there slain. Queen Prasuti fell at Shiva's feet and begged that her husband be brought back to life. Shiva lifted her up because she was Sati's mother after all. He looked around and saw where Daksha's head was crushed and mashed. Veerabhadra had stormed on it. It was only the crown next to it that gave away it was Daksha's head. Shiva took the head of a sacrificial goat and placed it on Daksha's body, thus bringing him back to life. He rubbed his hand on his body to take a bit of ash and blew it in the air. All those who had been slain came back to life, all but Sati. Shiva knew that Sati wanted to be pure for him again after having violated her Pativrata dharma by arguing with him, the omniscient Shiva. He knew that it would be a few thousand years before Sati will be reborn as Parvati and perform intense penance to be his consort once again. Shiva went back to Kailasa, sat in his yogic posture and took the deepest plunge into dhyana, taking his meditative trance to nearly a point of no return. Now the story of the birth of Parvati. So Sati is taking her next birth as Parvati again to be wife of Lord Shiva. Yeah. You want to read that portion?
Yeah, in a minute. Sati and Shiva, they didn't even really argue. She turned herself to a pile of ashes just thinking on this conversation, knowing that he already knew what was going to happen, and then I guess the shame of what her father had said about him. But she's recounting this, that they had argued, but they never even argued. Not in the way that humans would think of an argument.
So I think Shiva wanted her to experience it directly than hearing it from Shiva himself, because she wouldn't be convinced if Shiva tells her the situation.
Or she's thinking, oh, he doesn't want to go to the party.
Exactly, yeah.
She wants to go to the party.
Right. Next is the story of the birth of Parvati. Sati is taking the next birth. as Parvati, who is going to be Shiva's wife again.
As time ticked by, a demon called Tarakasura began conquering Devaloka and all the other planes of existence. He was too powerful, invincible. For thousands of years he had sat in such searing tapasya that Brahma had to appear before him. Daksha's yajna had already been destroyed. Tarakasura knew that Sati had given up her life and that Shiva would not take anyone else as his consort. Therefore, he asked Brahma for a boon that he could only be killed by a son of Shiva. The supreme goddess Sati was reborn as Parvati to Himavan, the king of the Himalayas, or the Himalayas himself, and Meena, a celestial nymph, and the queen of Himavan. Parvati did intense tapasya and received Shiva as her husband. Himavan, unlike Daksha, was a humble and just king. He accepted his daughter's choice wholeheartedly. Soon after Shiva took Parvati as his consort, the natural yogi that he was went back into his meditative state. The Devas were aghast because they needed Shiva to consummate the bond with Parvati so that she could bear his son, who would have eventually slain Tarakasura. But who could awaken Shiva from his dhyana? They sank to their knees in supplication and begged Parvati to intervene in Shiva's dhyana and bring him to the normal plane of consciousness. When she heard the cause, she said shyly that no pativrata woman would break her husband's meditation for a sexual union. Besides, she knew that if Shiva had thought it right, he would have done so a long time ago. Pray to him, she suggested. He'll give you the right thought to emerge victorious. The Devas did as instructed, but after a while, a thought entered their minds. They sent Manamata, the god of love, who shot his 5 shafts of love to arouse the desire of copulation in Shiva. When those arrows hit Shiva, he was utterly displeased. He opened his third eye and turned Manamata to ashes. Suddenly the whole world became a desolate place. Love became dry, as no man wanted to touch any woman, and vice versa. The birds and animals stopped breeding, as there was no desire in the absence of Manamata. The Devas approached Shiva along with Rati, the wife of Manamata, and begged Shiva to restore Manamata to his physical form. Manamata, however, had already been turned to ashes. Shiva granted a boon that since Manamata could not be brought back to life, he would now live Ananga, without form.
Anga means organs, and Ananga without organs, without form.
In all living entities, and keep desire alive. Rati pleaded with Shiva to at least cast his yogic glance at the mound of ash so that Manamata could be delivered. Shiva hesitated, but when Rati wouldn't relent, he agreed to cast a glance at the knoll of ash. As soon as he did that, a form arose from the ash. It was Vandasura, another demon, who made his abode in Tripura. He wreaked even greater havoc on the Devas. Distraught and lost, they approached the eternal itinerant Narada, who advised them to do a yajna. It all started from a yajna, the sage says. It'll end with one. Only the supreme goddess can help now. The Devas organized an elaborate one, and out of its sacrificial fire the supreme goddess arose in the form of Mahatripura Sundari. This was an exquisite form, fair-colored, four-armed, fragrant, heady, beautiful, well-endowed, compassionate. Yet she was holding the 5 arrows of Cupid, a goad, a bow, and an arrow. The Devas didn't know how to propitiate her. Confessing their ignorance, they begged Devi to explain how to welcome her. Mother Divine called upon her 8 companion energies called Vagadevis. They were the same who had manifested at the time of Bhadrakali's origin. They had been a witness to various aspects of Devi. The Vagadevis began singing glories of the Supreme Goddess by addressing her with one of her 1,000 names, which are also known as Lalita Sahasranama. And they began most reverently and melodiously. O Devi, the sacred mother, you who are the eternal providence whose refuge we seek, you are the empress of all worlds, most gloriously seated in your throne. O Mother, you only manifest to fulfill noble intentions arising out of the fire of purities in one's mind. Om Shri Mata, Shri Maharajni, Shri Mat Sinhashaneshwari, Siddhagni Kunda Samputa Devakarya Samudayata. Samudyata.
It's a little Sahasranamam. Sri Mata Sri Maharajni Sri Mat Simhasaneshwari Chidagni Kunda Sambhuta Devakarya Samudyata.
The 8 Vagadevis went on to sing glories of Devi. And
Vagadevis? Where is it?
Vagadevis.
The 8 Vagadevis.
8 Vagadevis went on to sing glories of Devi. And this is where in Lalita
Sahasranama.
Sarasranama.
Yeah, Sahasra is 1000 and Nama names.
The first mention of Kundalini and chakra is ever made. Before all other scriptures, commentaries, samhitas, this is where Kundalini is first touched upon as the pristine, formless aspect of the goddess, the primordial energy. I do not let my words scatter here and there like pollen, nor do my sentences grow like purposeless weeds. I have carefully, cautiously, and conscientiously chosen to give you the background story of Kundalini, because between Daksha's yajna and manifestation of Devi lies the secret of sadhana and chakras. There is not a classical text on chakras that I haven't examined, but not surprisingly I found them lacking in practical and esoteric aspects. If you are merely interested in theoretical exposition, you may gain more by reading such texts. Hence, disregarding pure theoretical knowledge and contemporary texts, I have based this entire treaty on Lalita Sarasranama alone, because all hurdles and milestones of Kundalini sadhana are present in this legend, like butter exists in milk. My words in this book are only for those who are not just interested in reading, but actually experiencing the truth of Kundalini themselves. As for me, I've prayed to Devi in her formed and formless aspects for more than 2 decades. I have invoked her in the Tantric way and the Vedic way. I have seen her, I have been her, I have seated her in my very being. In the Himalayan woods, on cremation grounds, in caves, under trees, and in abandoned places, I've played in her motherly lap. I've sported with her youthful form. If you doubt that this is possible, then I encourage you to put this book down and read something that is more believable. Maybe today's newspaper or something else that your conscious mind can accept and understand. This work is based on my direct experience, and I'm presenting you the truth of the chakras as it is, without any sugarcoating or exaggeration. Lalita
Sahasranama
was then narrated by Hayagriva, a form of Vishnu, with the head of a horse, to the sage Agastya for the benefit of human race on this planet and many other parallel ones. So, what you have in this book is straight from the horse's mouth, if you see what I mean. All glories.